Book 16. The Demi. We're going to go slow through this one too. What happens in Book 16? What's the banner headline here?
They both arrive.
Who both?
Telemachus and Odyssey. They both arrive home, but also the suitors of Telemachus' mother.
Don't jump to the suitors!
No, but it's like
I know, it's all connected and you're thinking ahead and behind at the same time, and this is the way Odysseus wants it, and this is the way Homer certainly wants it, and he's playing three-dimensional chess at all times, and everything is always happening at once because that's the way fate works. But at this moment in time, Homer is sitting there around the fire singing a certain sequence of words, and we got to go with that sequence. And what do they do as they roll off his tongue? And here, the first headline of this has to be Father and Son Meet. Odysseus is home having dinner or something with Eumaeus, sitting in the hut looking like a dirty beggar. And who walks in? Telemachus.
And here he goes.
The son he left in infancy. Presumably one of the driving forces for him to get home. Does he jump right up and say, "Son, it's me"? No, he does not. Again, he doesn't do anything particularly impulsively. With good reason. When he acts impulsively, he tends to get smacked down pretty hard. But here, he is once again sitting back, taking it all in, figuring out the angles before he makes a play. He would be a fantastic football coach. But this isn't football. This is his son. And look how Homer is casting it. Look at the ways in which he is torquing up the anguish of this moment. Because your only response at this is, what a jackass to do this, to not respond like a human being on some emotional level. Look how it's played. He walks in. The dogs, as a rule, would bark at strangers. The dogs that, as a rule, would bark at strangers were quiet when they saw Telemachus. They panted at him. When Odysseus saw how they acted, he heard footsteps coming. He said, because Odysseus can read the situation, he's always alert to things going on. He's like, wait a minute, the dogs are... Something's going on. He's always alert. The quality of a soldier, the quality of someone who's a little paranoid, the quality of somebody who cannot trust. When Odysseus saw how they acted and heard footsteps coming, he said, Eumaeus, someone must be coming, a friend or somebody you know. So he's already got some conclusions here. He's already thought ahead. He's not only hearing the dogs do stuff, but he's characterizing the behavior and drawing conclusions from that. He's saying, all right, no, this isn't a stranger. The dogs would be making more noise. This is something else. Maybe it's, if it's not a stranger, maybe it's a friend. Eumaeus, you have a friend coming. And notice the impersonality of a friend. Someone you know, the dogs are friendly with no barking. I hear footsteps. You know, he's paranoid. Then look at this sentence, or this paragraph here. He hardly finished when his son, his own dear son, was there inside the gate. Amazed, the swineherd jumped up, letting fall the cups in which he had been mixing wine. It spilled. He ran forward. He ran towards his master, kissed his face and shining eyes with both his hands, and wept. just as a father, when he sees his own dear son, his only son, his dear, most precious boy, returning from foreign lands after years of grieving for his loss, welcomes him. So the swineherd wrapped his arms around the godlike Telemachus and kissed him, as if he were returning from the dead.
He greeted him better than his father.
Yeah. Eumaeus is so excited to see the young prince come home that he jumps up and embraces him. And this alone is heartbreaking drama. But look how the poem is doing it over and above that to make it even more heartbreaking and even more confusing. I was emphasizing pronouns. He, his, he, his, he, his. You don't get a lot of names in here. When you see he jumped up to embrace his son, who do you think, or who would you naturally think or want to think is that he?
Odysseus.
You want it to be his father. You want it to be Odysseus, but it's not. And in fact, that doesn't get revealed in that first sentence until the end of the sentence. He hardly finished when his son, his own dear son, was there inside the gate. Amazed, the swineherd jumped up. So suddenly the swineherd is jumping into the consciousness, because up until that point, let's face it, everybody is imagining in their head only two characters on that stage. You're imagining, all right, the swineherd might be there, but he's a background character. Nobody gives a damn. You're imagining the father and the son, and they're coming in, and something is going on between them, some supercharge, and then the swineherd jumped up, just sort of jumps in there. And that's the only identifier beyond the pronoun in that whole passage. And it's a shock. It's a cruel twist, because you want that satisfaction. You're rooting for it. Let's face it, this is homecoming. This is nostos in the Greek. This is what the whole poem has been about, and is building to this one emotional moment. And Odysseus just sits there and lets some other guy go up and welcome his son. And they have this beautiful, touching reunion, Eumaeus and Telemachus, where Telemachus even calls him grandpa, which in the original Greek is ata, but that doesn't mean grandpa. It really just means old one. Different translations will translate that different ways. Sometimes they'll call him old one, sort of like viejo in Spanish. Sometimes they'll call him uncle, sometimes father. He is the replacement father in front of his own father. Now, you can feel bad for Odysseus to see this play out, and on a human level, you imagine like a divorced dad coming home and seeing his own kids interacting with a loving stepfather who is fulfilling that role that he never could, and that grabs you. But still, you want him to get off his ass and say, I am here. You want him to identify himself. But he doesn't. And they have this beautiful little meeting where he's just sitting there. Odysseus starts to talk to him. Then Odysseus, this is like line 90, then Odysseus, frustrated, said, my friend, it is my duty to speak out when I hear the dreadful things those suitors have been doing in your house against your will. That really hasn't been raised. It breaks my heart. You are a good man. Tell me, did you choose to let them bully you? Modern parlance would call this blaming the victim, but just think of this also. He's testing his son's loyalty. He's saying, Yeah, well, you're kind of the man of the house, but you're letting all this happen. Why? Do you want it to happen? Do you want them to move in? Are you siding with them? Or are you hoping that one of them will take your mom away so that you can be king? What's your angle here? His own son. He cannot trust, he cannot have faith in his own son. So he's testing his son, which just makes my blood run cold. Around Athena comes back, around line 160 or so. At that, the swineherd tied his sandals on and started off towards the town. Athena noticed him leaving from the yard and stood beside him as a woman, tall and skillful and beautiful. Odysseus could see her standing beside the entrance to the cottage. Telemachus could not. The gods are not equally visible to everyone. The dogs could see her, but they did not bark. They whimpered and slunk back across the room in fear. This is a great little detail tied into the natural world. She raised her eyebrows with a nod. He understood and came out, past the wall, and stood beside her. Then Athena told him, Odysseus, great strategist. And here you can almost feel a little barb on that. Great strategist. It is time for your son to know the truth. She has to smack it. She has to say, you're lying to your son. What gives? Enough playing around.
She wants to turn him back into Odysseus.
She turns him back into him. She takes away the negative makeover. She gives him that glorious warrior image that he so wanted at the beginning. But now it's not so that he can go in shielded as a warrior as he goes into battle. Now he needs to be exposed for the man he is, which is this image of the warrior, which is all his son has ever really had to cling to. His son has no idea what he looks like. He recognizes him, but only superficially, because they don't know one another. And there is that touching little reunion.
At first, his son thinks he's a god.
Yeah.
And then he says, no, I'm not a god, I'm your father.
And just think of that immediately. Long-suffering, that's like line 185, excellent. Long-suffering Odysseus replied, I am no god. Why would you think such things? I am your father, the same man that you mourn. I am no god. We began with him on Calypso's island being offered the chance to be a god. And he rejected it because he wanted to be a human being. And here he is at that moment where he needs to identify himself as an andra, a man. Telemachus is remarkably forgiving of this. Maybe he's not thinking it all through. He's understandably happy to see his dad. But they fall almost immediately to the business of hand, plotting revenge. Plotting his return to the court, his slaying of the suitors, his reassertion of His kingly identity. Telemachus asks him around like 255, can we find some kind of helper willing to fight for us? Odysseus said, do you think Athena and her father Zeus would be strong enough to keep us safe? Would any other help be necessary? Again, a little ego showing through here, I would say. Yeah, I got some big guns on my side. Don't you worry about it. Athena and Zeus, they're with me. We're set. No need to worry. There is a sign of piety in that. The flip side, you can strip away the ego and just say, yeah, we're on the side of the gods. And we are subservient to them, but they are great, and we are comparatively nothing. It says both things at the same time, if you just give it that space to. Telemachus replied, the ones you mention are good defenders. Zeus and Athena, the ones you mentioned. They sit high among the clouds, and they control both men and gods. The veteran Odysseus replied, those two will quickly join the heat of battle when we begin to grapple with the suitors, when in my house the god of war is testing our fighting force and theirs. He is imagining the god of war testing kind of the way he does. Always testing. Go back at dawn and join those overconfident young men. The swineherd will escort me into town. I will again be looking like a beggar. If they abuse me and you see me suffer, you must restrain yourself. Now again, lots of fatherly advice to give. 20 years of absenteeism. This is the first real instance of fatherly advice he has ever imparted, and it is restrain yourself. You're going to see them abusing me. You might have an emotional reaction to it. Restrain that emotionalism. Use your reason. Imagine the consequences. If you get emotional about that, if you overreact to the suitors beating up on the beggar? Well, why would they do that? What's with this beggar anyway? Well, maybe we should just kill him before we have to find out otherwise. He's educating his son in how to be his son, teaching him about consequences, but also significantly driving home the message that you have to restrain yourself. They then turn to the matter of ferreting out who is loyal and who is not. And here we get like almost McCarthy-esque. It's a little sneaky. It's a little paranoid. Odysseus manages to doubt his own son one more time, around line 300. And one more thing, if you are my own true son, I thought we covered that. Odysseus doesn't let anything lie. Of my own blood, let no one know that I am in the house. Laertes, his father, Telemachus' his grandfather, and the swineherd must not know, nor any of the slave girls, not even Penelope, until we have determined the women's attitude. Not even his father, who lives alone and is miserable, missing his son, and not even Penelope, who has been counting the days for 2 decades for him to return, or at least to get some word of him, saying, no. Don't let them know. They might want to. I'm sure they'd be happy to know, but don't. Now that's good strategy on one part. It's thinking like a military man in this military plan that they're hatching, but it's a discordant note in a non-war scenario because it's betraying the people most emotionally invested. But their reason is significant. Until we have determined the women's attitude, women's plural, the slave girls around Penelope, he wants to figure out where the slave staff, if you will, where their loyalties lie. Have they been faithful to the absent king? You know, are they still loyal servants of Odysseus, even though Odysseus has been absent for 20 years now? I don't know. How can we figure out whether they are? We also must test the male slaves. Always testing. Test the male slaves and see who has respect and fears me in his heart and who does not, and who looks up to you as you deserve. Who fears me in his heart. This is not a particularly cuddly boss. This is the undercover boss as a jackass. But he's aligning himself with his son. And who looks up to you as you deserve. Again, a little bit of a twist on his son, however. Saying, you know, they all look down on you because you've been such a panty waste for the last few years. His glowing son said, Father, you will see my courage in the moment. I am tough. I'm a big boy now. But it would take too long to go around and test each man like that, and all the while the suitors would be sitting in your house wasting your wealth with heedless partying. So reconsider. Now suddenly, the little wuss from the beginning of the book, who is just, oh, where's my daddy, and I don't know how to be a man, and I don't know how to do anything. Now he's saying, no, Dad, you're wrong. You're the big hero. You were at war. You're home. Good. You're going to go back as king. But let me tell you, you got no idea what you're talking about. Completely impractical. He's, Telemachus is growing. Well, he's growing up. We'll just leave it at that. So reconsider. I agree you should find out about the women. Which of them are innocent and which dishonor you. However, I have no desire to traipse around and test the men. We can do that later if Zeus reveals a sign to us. Why is he signaling that the women should be reserved for a special scrutiny? Yeah, we'll get to the men. The men slaves, yeah, sure, but, you know, the women. What?
Is it because things about like the woman had the maids and stuff having sex with like the suitors?
Yeah, he knows that the some of the maids, household slaves, can't let that word go, are sleeping with the suitors. You know, they're hanging out for 10, 20 years or so. You got to kill some time.
The woman would probably cause them more trouble.
Women always cause more trouble. How in this context? What's that?
The mouth, basically, like they have their mouth in the men's ear, so whatever they say would go. They cause some kind of problem if they weren't with on his side.
They're always and sure, you got to cut that out because, you know, if we're going to kill the staff, we're going to kill the staff. But do we really want all that yapping in our ear while we're figuring out who to kill? Let's just kill all them initially. And then we can take our time with the rest. That's what he's arguing here. Why? Any idea? I don't know. This trait of misogyny pops up in Telemachus particularly. That is very disquieting. What do you got there?
I was just thinking, like, maybe they're unsure of Penelope's loyalty, right? And because these are, like, her the people that are working with her. Like if they find out that the workers are unloyal, they'll know Penelope's as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of suspicion around whether or not Penelope has remained loyal in one way or another. Loyalty. In your heart, in your behavior, there's a difference between the two. What do you get credit for? What should you be blamed for? But again, this isn't Odysseus coming up with this, who has his own suspicions of his wife and will, heartbreakingly again, but on a somewhat different battlefield, test her coming up. This is Telemachus, who grew up with a single mom. And now he is suggesting that, well, yeah, I'm not sure about her and the women around her. Maybe, it might just be best to kill all the women slaves just in case. Because that might be a sign of whether or not Penelope has been turned. But it's an ugly side of him. Now, his whole arc, if you will, his whole story has been growing up and becoming a man. And at this moment where he is proving, or at least claiming to be a man, he seems intent on proving that by trashing women. There is that misogynist note there that you have to wonder, is that part of what it means to be a man?
Maybe that was his only way to show himself, to establish himself.
Yeah. A Freudian reading of this might be that, Odysseus has been absent. He is this image of a god in Telemachus's mind, and he has grown up under the thumb of this woman. She is the only authority figure he's ever known. So in order to be a grown-up now, he needs to put her down. And just remember, he cut his teeth on her in that very first scene where he told her, she comes down and says, why are you singing that song about the soldiers returning from Troy? It hurts me. Please sing something else. And his response was the ever empathetic, "Shut up, Mom! Go back to your women's work."
I feel like maybe he's putting on a facade for his dad, because in the beginning, I don't feel that he's become much more of a man. I feel like he's still, he's trying to prove to be his father more than anything else in my opinion. And in the beginning, he was getting tucked into bed by this woman, I forget her name, but she was
Eurycleia.
Yeah, he was getting tucked into bed by her, so maybe he's trying to push all of this away so that he doesn't even have that in his brain, this woman, these women are, raising him too. And, he's trying to be yeah, I'm so independent. These women, they're all probably trash. Me and you, Dad. Me and you, we got this. And that's how I viewed it.
Yeah, I think that's really valid. I think he has this image of his father as a warrior, or a god. That's how he sees him, this enormous heroic figure. So the only way he knows to talk to Dad is about, what can we kill? That's a guy thing, right? That's how guys talk. They talk about going and killing stuff. He has no other way to relate to his father. His mom has all this complicated history, and who among us would not like to blot out certain embarrassing moments of ourselves from our past? And he might be trying to do that by pushing away these female figures in his life that have, in a way, helped him grow up, but also, by their nature as authorities, kept him down. And, it's hard to feel yourself tough when you're standing around and your nanny is right next to you and she's going, oh, I remember when he had a little poopy in his diaper and he has such a cute little tush. He's never going to feel like a grown-up like that. So, yeah, the Freudian instinct is to kill that, literally or metaphorically, and assert himself in this image of what a man is. And that image is somewhat vested in cruelty. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, so they don't trust women at all. And how come they're trusting Athena? Like, she's the one suggesting them everything and they're worshipping her, but like in reality they really hate it.
Athena is the most powerful woman or female in this characterization, in this whole scenario. And yeah, she is calling the shots. But Odysseus, when he's recounting his journeys and multiple times telling people how he did, he very rarely gives credit to anybody, especially Athena. He is very often the victim of God screwing him over, but he very rarely says, yeah, Athena really helped me out of a jam. He'll brag about the gods have my back, but he doesn't actually come out and say very often that, well, yeah, I got into trouble and she really saved my skin. It's a characteristic of perhaps a patriarchy, overlooking anything that cracks that image of male superiority, of male authority.
And also the monsters in the stories, like on Odysseus' way home, like the nymphs, for example, or like the two other monsters. I think the two other monsters were also women, right? With the 6 dog heads. That monster was also a woman, a female, and the monster that was like, I forgot, like in the sea, that was like destroying ships.
A lot of the monsters that he narrates his stories to the Phaeacians, they're all women.
Yeah.
Scylla and Charybdis are women. Circe is a woman. Well, they're not women, but they are female gendered. They're these beasts that always take the female pronoun. They are significantly, almost to a T, aside from Polyphemus and some of the others, they are females. Now those are the characters that he is narrating the stories primarily to Alcinous, trying to say that, well, yeah, all of these treacherous females are out there to get guys like you and me. They're always screwing things up for us. But there is that recurrent note that is struck where women are troublesome, women are difficult. And let us remember, Hera is the one who begins the trouble for Odysseus. Hera is deeply opposed to Odysseus getting home. And she, as Zeus's consort, as the queen of the gods, trying to frustrate that throughout. In that face, you see Odysseus and Telemachus trying to meet on some sort of equal ground where they're laying this plan together. And remember, this is what Odysseus does. So by creating a plan together, and you see Telemachus having some agency and saying, no, that part's a little weak, why don't we try this instead? Don't do this, let's do this. Telemachus is joining in on that same field so that they are actually doing something that defines them, that is their identity. They are planners, they're thinkers. They're not just, fighters. Yeah, they're okay fighters. They're not the best fighters. They are the best thinkers. Or at least Odysseus is, and Telemachus finally has the opportunity to see firsthand what that is and have an image of that so he knows how to grow up into it. And at the end, after all this, and you see this weird coming together of the two of them, sort of like, yeah, okay, this is who we are. This is how we can connect. we can connect with this plan. We're planning together. That's what we do. And they have that shared moment so that when Eumaeus comes back, it's suddenly a shifted calculus. Whereas the scene began with Telemachus and Eumaeus so tight and hugging, and Odysseus was on the outside of that circle looking in. Now suddenly, Eumaeus comes back. He's a little oblivious. He was off and he warned Penelope that, yeah, you know, your son is back and whatever, and there's rumors of the suitors trying to kill him, yada, yada, yada. Who cares? He comes back to the sty and finds Odysseus and Telemachus suddenly getting along. Odysseus is now once again returned to his shriveled ways. And the last lines of that, around line 475, then Prince Telemachus began to smile and met his father's eyes. He did not let Eumaeus see. When they were finished cooking, they shared the dinner equally, and all had plenty. Then they took the gift of sleep. So, on a behavioral note, they're all equal, but it is made clear in the very beginning of that line that it's different now. Telemachus and Odysseus have found one another, and they're not cutting in Eumaeus. Eumaeus, again, who is the super loyal swineherd, and Telemachus saw him as a father figure. Now his real father has stepped in, and a wall has gone up with this old father figure, and he's not letting him in on the secret. It's something that Telemachus and Odysseus share to the exclusion of Eumaeus. Eumaeus is now the character on the outside of the circle looking in. He just doesn't know it. Maybe he senses something. It's kind of a hard dynamic to hide. But in addition to the planning that Odysseus and Telemachus share, they're now sharing exclusion. They're now sharing this basic distrust of other human beings. Why wouldn't Telemachus just go, Eumaeus, great, you're back. Hey, the old guy's really my old man. Yeah, and we got this great plan. We're going to let you in on it because, you know, we're kind of outnumbered. We need every man on deck. Let's go. Let's sit down and hash out this thing together. No. He just, oh, hi, Eumaeus, you're back. Right. No, we've just been getting to know one another. You know, the old beggar's been telling me some stories. Oh, nothing special. Yeah, what's for dinner? The wall has gone up. The distrust is there. And Telemachus is his father's son. Finally. They will fight together, and it's a heroic moment. But this is the moment that they actually meet as a single identity, a single understanding of who they are in the world, which is, in many respects, the trajectory that both of them have been on. It's just that Telemachus finds it in this scene, and it'll take a little bit more for Odysseus to bring it home.